Okay, this afternoon we are beginning with a presentation by Chris Jones. Chris grew up in Wilbraham, Massachusetts, as I recall.
You remember? I'm amazed.
Yes,
Homo-friendlies.
in case you don't know that, when you're driving on the Main Pike, there's this big display on the side of the road that says Home of Friendlies Restaurants. And I suspect it's still there.
It's still there.
And as I recall, you were at least enticed to come to Cornell by Don Berth. And Don lived in your town, and at the time he had an interesting collection of jobs. And I just want to tell you how the number of people we have doing jobs has increased over time. Don ran the co-op program for the college. Don was the person who worked with in development. He was the development office. So here was one person did both of these things, and he also did quite a bit of work with the budgeting process. Now we have probably 50 people doing this. Now, mind the scale has increased, but it's kind of interesting how over time you get the scope creep. But anyway, Don was instrumental in convincing Chris Jones to come to Cornell, and for which we were extremely lucky. So this would have been 1976 then when you showed up. So there are two of his classmates who are here as well, Sam Millett and Eric Gensch. They were in the class of 1980, which in my view was probably the best class that I taught.
Yeah. 1980.
1980. And Chris liked it so much that he decided he'd stay on. And Chris did 2 Master of Engineering projects, as I recall.
2 Masters of Engineering.
And then he did his MS degree,
yes.
And then he got his PhD.
But I only got 1 MH degree.
That's right, but you did the work.
That's
twice.
okay.
That's right. So, but he was here for 9 years as a student and did some extraordinarily interesting things, not unrelated to what you're going to talk about this afternoon. So, like this morning when I talked about something that I started, basically 5 decades ago, he's going to talk about something that he started 3.5 decades ago, which is about Gantt charts. And so he did this incredible piece of work.
Don't steal it.
Don't steal it.
He's going to tell us.
I'll tell you about it.
Oh. Well, he did a lot of incredible
Setting
work.
expectations.
So after he graduated with his PhD, he had a number of positions in a couple of universities. This funny school in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, something like that. And then he went out to the West Coast, and he ended up ultimately working for Chesapeake Decision Sciences and then Aspen Technology. And he also worked with one of my sons, so a special relationship in that regard. And then he went to work for Amazon, along with at least one other person from Aspen. And they did some incredible work on improving the way the customer had their experience. And ultimately, I think it wore you out. But he also got me to come out and do some work on logistics with Amazon, which turned out to be a lot of fun as well. And then he's off in a new life. He's working at this company with some principals, names you probably don't know, but Tom Baker was instrumental in developing scheduling tools for the chemical industry. He had worked at Exxon and was a principal mover, and Chris was a co-op student and worked with Tom as a co-op student, if I recall correctly. It's amazing how much of this I remember.
Oh, and you're stealing my presentation, but go right ahead.
All right, well, he's had a lot of experience. He's done a lot of work with these kinds of problems, and he's an extraordinarily interesting guy, and I'm going to let you say it since I don't want to screw up the rest of it.
Well, and Jack is being very modest about his impact at Amazon, because he came into Amazon and basically completely restructured all of Amazon's supply chain from a single echelon supply chain to a multi-echelon supply chain. Just one of the few accomplishments that Jack has done. So I'm really, really excited to be here. I had a lot of fun preparing this presentation this time. And also picking up on Jack, I'm going to actually steal a technique patented by Jack in terms of giving a presentation. And I'm giving you warning. I'm going to be asking some questions, and I'll expect responses. If I don't get them, I'll call on you. And the questions get harder as we go along. Now, you're all modelers. I think you can model an objective function and make your choices. Okay? So I encourage you to step up and let's begin.
Answer early, those are the easy ones.
You figured out the objective function. Awesome. So I work with Tom and Andy with our little company called Atlantic Decisions Sciences, and I'm listed at the top for this talk. But with the support and ideas and encouragement of lots of the people here over the past 40 years or so, but I don't like to admit to the exact number at this point in my life. Okay, first question. What's a Gantt chart? That's in my title. Okay, good. What's a Gantt chart? The chair. Go for it.
It's a depiction of a schedule over time.
It is, and that's a very good answer. I'll give you the answer that I have, and I'll show you one. This is from the software that I hope to demo at the end of the day. I put it as a sentence. It's just a collection of labeled timelines, often used for scheduling. So let's see. Yeah, so here we have some timelines. There's some labels over here. This says reactor 1, reactor 2 is cut off. I'm sorry about that. And so we have some labels here, and we got some timelines, and so this reactor is performing a process. This is a fake chemical plant making fake chemicals, but this is an operation called Cosanter 1, and it's consuming some raw materials, and it's running them through a reactor. We got 3 reactors here that the outputs of the reactors are feeding 4 lines where they're combining some products and blending them, then we package them, and then these guys down here is an ordering line, and they're fulfilling some demands going out there. Now, Gantt charts have been used for over 100 years. I'm going to just talk about the history of these charts in just a minute or so. And they're representing very complicated systems. This is really complicated because, okay, this is just looking at it is complicated, but then with it underneath here, there's a lot more. This operation is consuming a lot of products and producing a lot of products to try to meet particular demands. These gray bits is the conventional. Okay, good. There we go. These gray bits are representing sequence-dependent setups. You got to clean out tanks, you got to clean out machines and all that. There's a lot going on here. Gantt charts are used to schedule, they're used to plan, they're used to figure out how we can improve processes, but they tell a story frequently. And I'm going to come back to that theme in a bit as well. One question is, so if you believe me, if this is a good enough definition for you, one of the themes that I'm going to come back to is, what are the labels? Seems like a boring, simple question, but it's going to turn out to have a lot of interesting implications. And related, what are shown on each individual timelines. Here we have a particular convention that we've used. There's lots that you've probably used, seen, or worked with these for a long time, and there's lots of different ways to represent it. Okay. Oh, ha! I misspelled that. I thought, tell me about the invention, not the inventory. I didn't inventory on the brain, obviously. Tell me about the invention of the Gantt chart. Who knows anything about the inventor, not the inventory, the inventor of the Gantt chart? Peter.
Henry Gantt.
Yeah.
More?
Except that I recently learned that that's probably not correct. His name was Henry Lawrence Gantt. He was born in 1861. He died in 1919. And he's attributed in Western circles as the inventor of the Gantt. But I recently learned, I didn't make this discovery, but I recently learned it was very likely, though it's hard to know because it was semi-contemporary, there's this guy. He's Polish. His name is Karol Adamiecki. And this is a paper he published in 1909. And right here, and I'm going to blow it up on the next slide, is a Gantt chart. Henry Gantt, his first publication was in 1910. And according to this article from the Academy of Management Proceedings, it was in use in 1896. Now, he didn't call it a Gantt chart, clearly. Okay? He called it a harmonogram. And this paper is published in Poland, and he did his work in Poland and in Russia. At the turn of the 20th century, the late 1800s and early 1900s, you can get these papers now online, which shocked me. Here's the paper. I used Google Translate to translate the Polish, and I could actually understand the translation through Google Translate. This is the actual article. See 1909 here, and it's a method of eliminating the organization of collective work in rolling mills. That's the Google Translate translation. So I don't know if it's good or not. In this journal called, I can't say that, but I'll say the English Technical Review. So I recently found this paper and found this Gantt chart, and I'll blow it up for you. Now, I said it's a labeled series of timelines. Well, he's actually showing here 3 schedules. First version of the schedule, the second version of the schedule, and the third version of the schedule, and I'll come back to that later in my talk. But this is for a steel rolling mill. So the labels are 7 different rolls through which this steel had to go. And then, even though this was written in Polish, you can begin to understand it. These are the various sequences that the roll would have to go through. It's a flow through the 7 rollers, and one cycle takes 35 seconds. Okay. So Adamiecki looked at this, and for this schedule, the throughput per day in this plant was 30 tons. Okay. Then he looked, well, we can make a process change, and I don't want to go into the details of the process change, where you could shorten the cycle time, and here he did, but it looks pretty much the same. You've got these flows going on to 27 seconds. And that improved the throughput to 39.5 tons per day. But then he saw, well, this roller is doing this cycle, but then you have to wait for every other roller to be done before you could run more stuff through. So they instituted another process change, and they could run things in parallel. And you can see that there's a lot more overlap, so the throughput went up almost 5-fold, okay, by making that particular change. Now, it was in Polish. Nobody read about it, though there was this article published in 1974, and I arrived at Cornell in 1976, so I have no excuses, okay? But again, this is telling a story, and allowed significant process improvement, huge process improvement, and we didn't need laser pointers or fancy laptops or fancy OR to necessarily do that. So just with a proper visualization and good brain power, you can make some changes. But then, what about Gantt? This is among the first Gantt charts that he ever published. So this is published in 1910. It's called Work, Wages, and Profit. If you'd like, I'll pass it around. It is a first edition. It is very precious. Be very careful, okay? And this also tells a story. This was in a clothing factory. And here, the labels are not machines, they're people. And this group of people are spoolers. There's two Gantt charts related here, and then these are the inspectors. Red means they're not meeting their bonus. There's a legend here for some of the other ones. But it tells a story. And it tells not only a technical story about the operations of the plant, but from a historic perspective, it tells a social story. I'll get to that in a second. First off, if you look, this goes from March to June, and then July to August. And you see a lot more black here. And what you also see, for example, here, this week, there's some red. And there's a lot of red here. Okay. That's Saturday. Okay. First, so the social story is, it was a 6-day work week. Okay. This was before 1910. And then at the bottom, the caption reads, and this is not English that we would not use today for many reasons. Task and bonus record of girls, and I don't know if they were truly under 18 or not, or if that was just the term. Girls winding yarn on spools. No disappearance of slack Saturday habit. So in other words, they changed some of the work rules, or they instituted a change to improve the productivity here. And these are the inspectors, and they also changed one of the incentive systems here to get rid of the red. So again, it told a story, and they were able to use that insight in order to come up with a better, improved, or at least increase the productivity. And I'm not going to comment about the social implications of all that, okay? But I had to point that out because I found it really interesting. There was another book, which I don't have here, written in 23 and then reprinted in 57, which is sort of the Gantt chart. It's all Gantt charts, whereas if you read Work, Wages, and Profit, there's only a few of them. Okay, now, in 1978, as Jack said, I was a co-op student here, and I went to work for Exxon, and it changed my life. It's where I first met Tom Baker. And it's where I first started to come out as a Gantt chart nerd. This was my first Gantt chart. And at the time at Cornell, I had to program on punch cards. There was no screens at all. And at Exxon, though, they had a green screen IBM 3270, 80 characters wide, and 24 characters tall. No 4K monitors. And this is a page from a proprietary manual from Exxon. Don't tell anybody, they may come after me. Of the first interactive scheduling system I ever wrote, called ProSit, and we were in anagram, what's the word? Where we always had to have names beginning with letters. So, and what you could do is you could type anywhere on the screen. It wasn't even line at a time. So here's a Gantt chart, we have some labels on this processing unit, we have some cost, and it was available, it's running this process from here to here. If you wanted to delete it, you just erased the characters and pressed enter. If you wanted to make it longer, you moved the colon over here. If you wanted to add in another P3 here, you typed P3, you pressed enter, and then this is an inventory chart at low resolution, where it's saying inventory 1 is below 25% at this point in time. You pressed it and recalculated it, and it would do that. And I thought that was great, and it was actually deployed and used at Exxon for several years. Okay. So then at Cornell invested a whole bunch of money in the engineering school because of Don Greenberg, who everyone should know pioneered so many techniques of computer graphics, but he was in architecture and we were in engineering, so they set up this engineering program. And one of the reasons why I stayed for the PhD program was I could work in this lab. Okay. And so we built something we got to use computer graphics, all 512 by 512 pixels. And this was a graphical scheduling system. And you could change the Gantt chart and see the projections of things there. And I think I have to go to, and I even have video. And guess who's in that picture? You might recognize somebody. And the magic of it was, so I could go there and edit things, and then if I press the evaluate button, boom, the inventory chart's changed. Okay?
No.
And then after that, Jack and Peter.
No, this is memory lane.
This is what you get to suffer through at a retirement celebration. Okay? In the COMAP laboratory that was funded by IBM, thank you very much, we built an interactive graphical scheduling system, and this was the Gantt chart that came out of there. And so Peter was always very inspiring to me because he was always thinking about how can we better represent these complicated problems so that people can understand what's going on so that we can communicate those things. And one of the things that I've never forgotten is the cumulative flow plot that Peter worked on, which is over time, as you make stuff, don't plot the instantaneous level, plot the cumulative amount that's produced. The slope is sort of the production rate. This is a multi-echelon production system, so that the distance between vertical lines is the inventory between one stage and another. And then the horizontal line is the amount of time that the inventory is waiting. So you get in one chart all of this particular information. And Peter wrote this paper, and here's a chart from there, from that. So that was a slight diversion from Gantt chart land. But I wanted to point that out. But now I'm going to talk about schedules. The previous schedule, we had machines and we had operations that are making products. You might have people and other types of resources and tooling. Schedules are multidimensional. So at the same time Cosmos was working, this was the advent of basic computer graphics that you can now get on your Apple Watch. Okay, but here you needed a whole room full of computers. So they said, it's really complicated. Can we use three-dimensional representations to help? So great. We created some of the work that I did inspired by people here was a three-dimensional. Now, notice I'm calling them Adamiecki-Gantt chart. And basically, if the Kuhn-Tucker conditions can be relabeled the Karush-Kuhn-Tucker conditions, I think we can call this the Adamiecki-Gantt chart. And if that's too many syllables, call it the AG chart, okay? So this was a physical model. I went to Ithaca Plastics and picked up a lot of plexiglass of this. And what is that representing? And is that anything useful? I just had to bring this as motivation for when we get to Pivotable Adamiecki-Gantt chart. So this is an original slide from the screen. We didn't have print screen in those days. So here's three machines, 1, 2, 3. And this machine is doing the first part of job 3, then the second part of job 3 is on this machine by color. All the yellows are a job, all the blues are a job, and they have to go in sequence. Okay, and here's another one. Well, there's another Gantt chart that might be of interest. The labels here are by machine. The labels here are by job. It's the same schedule. It's just shown differently. So we have job 1, it runs on machine 1, then machine 3, then machine 2, and job 2. Okay? And in the three-dimensional Gantt chart, that's actually the way it was being represented. And so you have three axes here. You got a machine axis, a job axis, and a time axis, and you carefully position these parallel little pipe heads, and things work. But you don't really get it until you watch the video. Okay. So this is all, trip down memory lane. Thank you for indulging me. It's amazing what the NSF will support. So here, I'm just rotating this from one to the other, okay? And then I rotate it back, and then I rotate it that way. And that's actually what the three-dimensional Gantt chart was. Now, I think the other amazing thing, aside from NSF support, was it was published in Operations Research. To my mind, looking back on this historically, I'm certainly proud of the paper in Operations Research. However, I have to wonder if the peer review process maybe needs improvement, but it also made the cover, okay, of that particular issue. Okay, so schedules are multidimensional, but I believe that the three-dimensional Gantt chart is not useful. It's a great piece of conceptual art. It's sort of clever, maybe. It's pretty. But there's another way to show multidimensional things. And if you ever used Excel, and if you ever used an Excel pivot table, it's one way to do it. And it's actually a two-dimensional physical display of more than 2 dimensions frequently. And Jack, your presentation helped greatly because, well, first off, what is pivoting? And in the interest of time, I'm not going to be experiential. I'm going to move forward. That's a pivot. That's multidimensional data. From Jack's talk earlier, some of you have arrived late, so may not understand it. But each column, there's a dimension here, there's a dimension here. This is representing spare parts, cost and availability and risk for jet fighter parts. And so then with each square, there's 2 more dimensions, and then the color of the dots is a 5th dimension, and then the color of the squares is a 6th dimension. So this is a 6-dimensional display.
And it's
so
animated, that gives you the 7th
animated
dimension.
7, there you go. Okay, so it's 7-dimensional display. So let's talk a little bit about who invented it. Excel calls it a pivot chart, and I use the term pivoting, but they didn't invent it. Lotus did. Okay, through Lotus Improv, which was a failed product. And some of the people in the room may not even know what Lotus was. It was the predecessor to Excel, and was the dominant player in the marketplace. And so you could have multiple dimensions where this is person, then by product, then by, I guess, French name, and then this is over time and in French. And you could drag and drop and reshape this by saying, okay, I want to see people across the top, and it'll reshape. The best example that I know of a system to do pivoting comes from a company based in Seattle, I'm proud to say, called Tableau. And the work underlying it came out of Stanford in the early 2000s. Okay? And in this particular case, I've taken different categories of, damn buttons, different categories of product over by time, and then I'm looking at sales and coloring the sales by this. And here's all the choices you can do, and you can drag them up here, you can drag them down there. I wanted to give a demo, but my laptop won't connect to this projector, so I can't do that, but that's fine. Hope you get the idea. Okay, so I think I can give you a demo of this, because let's just do this for Gantt charts. Okay, real simple. So here, for example, this is a snapshot from the product that this particular software, how did we get it developed? We've been working on it for about 5 years, and 2 out of the 3 of us have day jobs. So in our virtual garage, we've been working on this. And now we actually have real companies using it. I'll get to that in a second. So this is the one you saw before, right? And just by dragging dimensions, you can, this is now by operation, showing this particular operation, Clarendon, running on these 2 things. So you get into some interesting circumstances that you do have to solve. In that, for this operation, it's now running on 2 facilities or machines or reactors simultaneously, so you have to handle the overlap problem. And there's a few other gotchas like that. But let's do a live demo. Okay. Now, I designed the software to run on a nice big high-resolution screen. So we're going to see how it works here, if you get the idea or not. And but let's see. Okay, so here it is. And we got all sorts of different stuff going on here. Let me just open up the Gantt chart for you. And then we'll start pivoting, and then I'll show you some applications of it all. So, okay. Here, and this is running in the cloud. I was going to run it locally on my laptop, but it wouldn't fit. And okay, good. We just let's go here, go here. Where did it go? Okay. There's many reasons why I have no hair, including genetics, but another reason is the demos that I give. Okay. Now it's a little bit small, so there's some weird stuff going on. Let me fix that. Okay. Leave it up a little bit. And okay, great. So this is what you've seen before, and we can just go pivot. So right now we're showing by facility group, facilities. And so if I just get rid of facility group, we just have that. Right? So then I can just drag operations up. And this is a view you haven't yet seen. It takes it a second to run. And this, it likes a nice, so now for this reactor, here are all the operations it's performing, and here it's organized all of the activities according to that particular operation. Let's pivot again. So let's take out the facilities. and we just have operations, but then we have to set the color so it changes by facility. And the label, the text that appears on the top that shows on facility. And it looks like there's nothing here, but there's actually stuff down here, and you can see some overlaps as well. So now you can see for each operation, what are the facilities that it's running on. The little gray bars on top are representing setup times for those particular things. Okay, so far so good. Let me do a time check. But I think we're under control. So let me go back. Actually, let me do some more. So, there's a lot of dimensions you can pick. There's a lot. There's a dimension called product. What products are being touched? You can say some activity is a problem. You can color code that problem. Let's do that. There we go. And show you underneath. And scroll down. There. So red, there's a problem with it. Green, there's some other different problem. This is just randomly sort of done. And so you can do, you can tailor your display in a whole bunch of different ways. You can have multiple displays simultaneously. And you can at least explore and see the story behind your chart. But I wanted to show you one thing in particular. There's a very important and useful dimension. And remember the first Gantt chart we saw from the second Gantt chart, the Adamiecki's first chart. It had 3 schedules. We're comparing schedules. Schedule is a dimension. Okay? And you can do some interesting things if you do that. So let's look at that. First off, I want to first pivot back to the normal one that everybody knows, which is machines by time. Just a second. There we go. And there we go. And let's go here. Let's go here. So this is the one you've seen before. Well, for this particular model, we have a bunch of candidate schedules, and I'm going to add one other schedule in because I want to take a look at it. Now you're going to get a little bit, well, that's useless. But what's going on here? You have 2 schedules, 1 facility. This has commingled all those activities so they've overlapped. It's not so useful. What you have to do is go into Pivot. And take schedule and just drag it up here. And now you've got 2 schedules. One, it has a background that's icky green, so let me fix that. So if I go to colors and I go to schedule and I go, let's not make it icky green, let's make it pink. I don't care. There we go. So now you can at least see 2 schedules side by side. Well, there is one interesting thing that you have to worry about, though. There's another way, though, to pivot it, which is useful. Because so now you want to compare reactor 1 schedule in one schedule to reactor 1 schedule in another schedule. That's sort of hard. Your eye has to dance. Well, pivot. And now you have 2 schedules for reactor 1 side by side. Now, Tableau is a brilliant system, and it can display Gantt charts and it can pivot Gantt charts. What it can't do is edit them. It can't edit them. Sorry. Thank you, Peter. I'll speak up. And so, for example, if you would like to take something for reactor 2, Claridone is happening here, and you'd like to have it here, just drag it. I'll first select it. And then I'll drag it down. It'll take a second if it's working. Why lose hair? Come on. Come on. It's just being slow. So. There we go. and we've taken that down. Or you could say, I like everything in Schedule 1, but I want it in Schedule 2. I can first say, clear an array, and then I can say, move from that row from there to there. Okay? But this is all generalized, okay? You can pivot on all sorts of different dimensions and drag them in all sorts of different ways to, and there we go, we duplicated that in that particular way. So that is what I call Pivotable Gantt charts. I've been working on this, on Gantt charts, for a little bit of time. And I actually implemented a version of this in the early 2000s for a previous company, but it never saw the light of day. That's a long story over some drinks. But with this new company, I need to just, in case I didn't have a live demo, showing a variety of other different types of things. So I'm almost done. In conclusion, I want to thank you for all of your attention, but I do need to apologize. This is a timeline of some of the things, the history that I've talked about, starting from the harmonogram in 1896 through the first Gantt chart that I've been able to find, to the Pivotable Adamiecki-Gantt chart that I first implemented, the introduction of Tableau, pivot tables, Lotus, Cosmos, Graphs, all these other things. But I have to apologize, because this is a highly selective, self-centered, biased presentation. And I am sure people are in here saying, but what about this and what about that? And I totally and utterly agree with them. Okay? That there are hundreds of systems that have beautiful ways of showing Gantt charts. Thousands of papers trying to work on algorithms that help generate schedules, and I just haven't had time to talk about them. But thank you for your attention. Are there any questions? Peter!
Yes. So the Excel Gantt chart does aggregation. So when you pivot on different columns, you are aggregating the underlying data.
Because the underlying data is numeric.
So when you aggregate, you are just superimposing. So is that an offsetting?
So that's an idea that I've had is how do you aggregate activities in the Gantt chart? What should be shown that will be useful to people? I'd love to talk to you about that, because I've thought about that.
Yeah.
And I don't have a simple answer. You could just aggregate it by saying something's happening in this row over this
Minimum
time.
and maximum. Yeah.
You could do something like that. But I found that usually if things get complicated and you don't understand what they're doing, you need to pivot again. Great. Thanks so much.